Hello, and welcome back to Sonata She Wrote, the channel where we like to get just a little bit theoretical. Today, we are going to be discussing Haydn's 85th Symphony, La Reine, or The Queen. Haydn is one of those composers whose music, I feel, is dependent on understanding what he's doing, and experiencing it through the form greatly enhances the experience of listening to it. So let's get right into it. The first movement of this symphony is a little bit different from the piano sonata that we analyzed last week, in that it begins with a slow introduction. Hepikoski and Darcy have this to say about slow introductions. Some sonata movements also feature parageneric spaces, or not sonata space. Everything else in the movement that may set up, momentarily step outside of, or otherwise alter or frame the presentation of the sonata form. Now, what they mean by this, although obviously the slow introduction is part of this movement, they mean that it is not part of the actual sonata form. So let's take a listen to the slow introduction of this piece and then discuss some of the characteristics of it. Hepikoski and Darcy describe four separate zones that might appear in a slow introduction in Sonata Theory. They are heraldic calls to action, quieter lyrical melodies, sequences, and dominant preparation. In this slow introduction, we really only have heraldic calls to action for several bars, followed by a dominant preparation on the dominant chord. I do, however, want to draw your attention to the second full bar, where Haydn briefly uses a chromatic leading tone to emphasize G. Although this isn't a G minor chord, it creates a sense that something has gone wrong, which is quickly wiped away by the E flat chord in the same bar. This moment of emphasizing G minor is a bit of clever foreshadowing that will return in the main body of the sonata form. Let's listen once more and also move on to the primary theme. Now the primary theme. This P theme is relatively simple. Harmonically, it's centered around 1 and 5 in B flat major, and it arrives at a perfect authentic cadence right away. You may notice, however, another little hint at G minor in the 10th bar of this theme before we move on to an attempt at a transition. But let's see how that attempt unfolds. This time, we'll hear the complete P section up until the medial caesura. What a P module this is! The relative simplicity of the theme hid, or maybe even gives, this theme its strength. You can see on this page an attempt at a transition and even a moment when a potential medial caesura is opened. Similar to Mozart's K545, however, this transition has failed to modulate. Unlike 545, though, it has also failed to even make an attempt at a half cadence. This attempt at a transition delivers a solid, perfect authentic cadence in B flat major. The primary theme then seems to feel that it has no choice but to reappear. Although this section does have the feel of energy gain that many transitions have, its failure to modulate and the reappearance of the main theme make me consider it simply a section of the primary thematic zone. Now that the primary theme has reemerged, we can see that this iteration is slightly more fleshed out. There are chords in the winds and a slightly more active bass line. You may notice, however, that the Achilles heel of this theme is still present. The G remains with its ominous hint at a minor mode. In spite of this, P manages one more PAC before the true transition opens. Hepikoski and Darcy consider a P theme with this many cadences to be overdetermined. When a primary theme cadences this much and this well, we have to ask ourselves what it might imply for the narrative. We might interpret it as a garish overcompensation, but the simplicity of this theme seems to me, at least, to represent a quiet kind of confidence that one shouldn't overlook. This TR is in a much better rhetorical position than the last attempt. We have a lot of energy gain, sequences, and it almost immediately modulates into F major. We also have an almost archetypical example of a medial caesura. There's a half cadence in F major, and it clears the way for S to enter. Wolf! Now take some deep, calming breaths with me. It's okay. Haydn has us in his hands. We have to trust him to get us out of this mess. This theme, labeled S1, is an absolutely shocking F minor. You're no doubt still reeling from this blow to your psyche, but actually for Haydn, this isn't too out of the ordinary. Although the theme comes in raucously with a lot of Sturm und Drang energy, it quickly loses focus, and instead of coming to a cadence, it reopens a medial caesura. In addition to being quite a surprise, this theme bears a striking similarity to the primary theme of the Farewell Symphony, which we'll hear in a moment. It's possible this is intentional, but we should keep in mind that this theme is mainly an arpeggio, and one arpeggio does tend to sound like another. Coincidental or not, the similarities are striking. They both perfectly embody the Sturm und Drang style. Leonard Ratner famously coined the use of the term topic in his 1980 book, Classic Music. A Sturm und Drang topic is marked by emotions of stress or terror. It is typically in the minor mode and may, as in the Farewell Symphony, include syncopations to add to this sense of unease. The Farewell Symphony is from Haydn's Sturm und Drang period, but Haydn was never one to put a good idea away forever, and here we are back again 40 symphonies later. Back to La Reine, you may have noticed that our S1 theme opened a second medial caesura. Let's listen to the remainder of the exposition and then unpack this turn of events. Hepikoski and Darcy refer to the double MC effect as a trimodular block. This often occurs when the attempted secondary theme is, quote, unable to move to the EEC and will instead be converted into the preparation for a new MC, end quote. I'm referring to page 171, S complications of the elements of Sonata Theory. Narratively, I believe this initial S theme represents the dark undercurrent that has been foreshadowed by the slow introduction and the P theme with their hints at minor modes. Fortunately, this theme quickly loses initiative and, after a brief transition, opens a new medial caesura, this time with caesura fill. Caesura fill is a technique of sonically connecting the transition to a new theme. In this case, we can see Haydn cleverly uses the accompaniment scale from the primary theme to lower us gently into F major and a new secondary theme. Although for many composers, a P-based S theme would be deformative, for Haydn, it's actually a normative choice and specific to his usual sonata style. Metaphorically, we can see how Haydn would use the initial strength of this theme to overcome the baked-in weakness of the initial S. Even so, we can see this theme struggling a bit and even developing itself as the harmonic rhythm increases, before we find ourselves comfortably reaching a perfect EEC in F major. The closing zone that follows is largely celebratory repetitions of the cadence. You may notice material from both the transition and S1 are included in this zone. Let's listen to the S themes again and move on to the development. As you can see, so far the development is centered around the initial Sturm und Drang S1 theme. Although this is not really in any one key, and therefore can't be considered to be in a minor mode, it certainly flirts with minor quite a bit, and it's also added a syncopated, energetic accompaniment. This development is partially rotational, meaning it doesn't use any material from before the medial caesura, and is based on the S themes, including our P-based S, S2. Narratively, this isn't surprising. Our P theme was perfectly capable of fulfilling its role. It's S space that clearly has some issues to work out. As a side note, you may notice that I've switched from Roman numerals to chord names. I typically do this in development sections because there often isn't a stable key to base Roman numerals in, so chord names are, I think, a bit more useful. As you can see, this developmental section has quite a bit of emotional growth to get through. Not that I can relate or anything, but let's pick up where we see S2 enter. Almost immediately, this theme has a different tone than previously. It quickly slips into imitative counterpoint and even uses our Sturm und Drang S1 theme as an accompaniment. In terms of topics, this style puts me in mind of the learned topic, or stile antico. In fact, this beautiful polyphony puts me in mind of Palestrina's masses of the late Renaissance. In the Oxford Handbook of Topic Theory, editor Danuta Murka writes in the introduction the, quote, aesthetic ambivalence of these styles, representing dignity and elevation due to their association with church music and an elite professional tradition, admired for the display of technical prowess, yet despised for their scholastic pedantry and air of classroom exercises, end quote. I think that in terms of our narrative, this learned style is representative of S2's exploration of the weakness in the P theme. S2 doesn't reject this weakness, but rather, through a contrapuntal and minor mode exploration, seeks to integrate it into its own sense of self. In Hebekoski and Darcy's own words, the sonata form is a metaphor for human action. Both the sonata itself and the individual themes within it have their own agency, their own goals that through a long compositional tradition, we are conditioned to expect them to succeed in. The sonata form becomes more than a simple scaffolding for themes when a composer plays with our expectations of the form, both in the fulfillment and the subversion of those expectations. Let's continue with the remainder of the development. Now we've come across the main conflict of this development. The key of G minor, threatened by the slow introduction and hinted at by repeated F sharp to G figures in the P theme, has finally materialized. This fully realized version of the minor mode P theme doesn't hold anything back and struts onto the stage in the energetic Sturm und Drang topic of S1. Unlike S1 though, our P theme remains as competent as ever and even steers the development away from a dominant lock in B flat major and instead sets up a dominant lock in G minor. As the music continues, you can almost feel it realizing that it's actually in the wrong place. We need to get back to B flat, but don't have any material left to get there. This is possibly my favorite moment in the sonata, a deus ex machina, or God in the machine. After a few bars of the music being stuck, or, in my opinion, the music thinking, Haydn, the god of the sonata if ever there was one, reaches out his hands and slides chromatically down into B flat major as if there was never any problem to begin with. But have we done our duty? Have the P and S themes grown to emotional maturity? Are they up to the task of reaching the ESC and creating a successful sonata form? Let's find out now. is sonata success if there ever was sonata success. Let's discuss a few of the moments in this celebratory recapitulation. First, the P theme. There are two important changes to this theme. The first is that it's maintained a small amount of the counterpoint we heard in the development. And the second, arguably the most meaningful, is the addition of a higher voice, the flute moving from A to B flat, with the violin moving from F sharp to G. Although the bass was always on E flat, the addition of this leading tone to tonic motion in the melody represents both a solidifying of the major mode and the adaptability of this P theme. Our competent primary theme doesn't reject its flaws, but rather learns how to work with them for the good of the movement. We can all learn a thing or two from this little theme. Also, you may have noticed, gone is the attempted transition. Instead of being overdetermined, P is confident in what it's accomplished and passes the ball to TR, which ultimately opens space for our P-based S. Although still the same S2 as before, the changes in the original theme let S2 stand out a little bit, and the moment before the ESC, where second oboe and flute enter, are truly beautiful. All that's left is our perfect, essential secondary closure, which S2 pulls off with no problems. The closing zone remains a celebratory exploration of the cadence and brings the movement to a close. I really hope you enjoyed the analysis of the first movement of Haydn's 85th Symphony, Reine. If you would like to hear the full movement without commentary, check out the companion video, which, in addition to the score, will also include a timeline of the sonata form to follow along with. The recording used today was the ensemble Tafelmusik of Toronto, Canada, conducted by Bruno Weil. Tafelmusik is a period ensemble and one of only a handful of recordings that I felt approached the correct tempi for this movement. If you enjoyed, please subscribe and feel free to let me know if you have any questions or would like to have a specific piece analyzed.